This is our first podcast.
This is our first podcast, absolutely.
Jimmy D and the Wolf.
That's right.
Woo!
I'm Jimmy D, and this is my man,
The Wolf. Tim Wolf.
We met through a case of coincidence. I believe that
God ordained.
God uses coincidence to maintain his anonymous status. We met through a mutual friend. I was looking for a place to stay, and a mutual friend of ours told Tim about me, and Tim, being the cat that he is, let me come stay at his house. We had never even met each other, and since then, we have written lots of really cool songs. We have launched a teaching website.
Absolutely.
Now this is our podcast. We're doing all kinds of cool stuff together. We have become like this.
Absolutely.
Both of us are very spiritual people, and it's been one of those crazy things that sometimes the universe just does one of these to you, and you go, well,
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you, Lord.
Yeah,
and
thank you, Lord.
I would say that she misrepresented you, Jimmy.
Really?
She said that you were very quiet.
That's certainly a misrepresentation, and that's maybe the first time I've ever been accused of that in my life.
Where did she come up with that? Well, maybe compared to her.
Maybe I was napping. Is that how we met? Maybe I was napping. Or I think the night that I met her, I think I had kind of a bad gig. I think that's what it was, honestly.
And you hadn't hardly met. How long had you known her?
Gosh, weeks.
Yeah. So
We
she vouched
barely
for you
knew each
without
other.
really.
Yeah.
Wow, and that's something.
Met her at a songwriter night, which is, sometimes that's how it works. You never know how things are going to connect for you.
And the thing about it is how our individual, Venn diagram, if you will, two-circle Venn diagram of skills overlap. There's not much overlap. I mean, you've got the gigging. I mean, you've been gigging. Like how many times a week would you guess you've been gigging for the last 20 years on average?
On average, minimal 4. Really good weeks, more gigs than there are days. There's some Saturdays where I'll have 3 or 4 gigs. When they come around, as an independent artist, when you're doing everything yourself, you just don't say no to them when they come around.
That blows my mind. I'm envious, as I've told you.
Well, the approach has always been that if you're playing guitar or any instrument, really, if they're paying you $1 or $100 or $1,000 or whatever it is that they're paying you, if you can get the gig, you take it because that's time with your instrument. And I always looked at it as paid rehearsal or paid practice.
Unbelievable. Yeah, absolutely.
Keeps your chops up.
Absolutely. No doubt. I do not disagree at 100%.
And I notice if I have a week without one or 2 weeks without one, and all of a sudden they start to miss here and there or whatever. It's interesting, and I see this in Nashville quite a bit, but not as much as I do back home. Back home, Southern Indiana, it seems like everybody has to play every different style because in bars, people want to hear classic rock and then they want to hear country and they want to hear a little bit of blues and a little bit of everything.
Well, the saying is, this is what it was told to me, that the licks that are common now that the Studio Cats are playing on the current country records are 70s and 80s classic rock riffs.
Sure.
So there's a lot more overlap than maybe the average guy might know.
Yeah, it's interesting. You have so many people that are mad and constantly complaining about country music changing and saying that's not country music and whatnot. And the classic rock stations just didn't play new rock. They're still playing the Eagles and Bad Company and stuff like that. And rock had to go somewhere. And now rock ended up on the country stations, which thank God it did because it still has a pulse. So all that, in my mind, when somebody says country anymore, it's like it's this huge amalgamation. It's not just country. It's kind of like pop that doesn't necessarily have an urban feel, and it's also newer rock, not heavy rock, but newer rock. It's become so many things, but it almost had to do that to survive. It's interesting, you know. I think that happens in every style of music. Every time it changes, you have the purists that say it's not that anymore. You know, even SRV, for Stevie Ray Vaughan, for all he did to revive the blues, the purists were so hard on him, you know. A lot of the purists were saying that's not the blues.
Yeah, absolutely.
That guy was essentially bringing it back from the dead and still caught a lot of flack from it. And who knows what that looks like 30, 40 years from now. There's probably going to be people listening to Keith Urban or whoever and saying, oh, yeah, that's the old school country music.
Yeah,
you know, it's just funny how it always evolves. I've seen it a lot with my experience in blues and jazz. Everybody has their opinion as to what it is, you know. Doesn't it seem like too much of it gets lost in that translation, genres and whatnot?
What do you mean gets lost?
It gets, like, there's certain art that seems to slip through the cracks just because nobody knows what to call it.
Oh, yeah. Sure. Well, certainly, I mean, not kind of directed to your question, but jazz and classical were once the popular music of the day, and blues. And now they're jazz record sales every year are going down year on year, and the customers brutal. For them are record buyers, not streamers. And classical, I read an article recently that the average age of the classical concert attendee has gone up by 10 years. It was 65 like 10 years ago. Now it's 75.
Wow.
The average age, or maybe it was median age. I don't remember the exact measurement, but
sure.
The bulk of the classical music fans are retirement age. And, you know, it doesn't take a genius to see that your clientele is dying off.
Yeah.
And so that's why most of the classical symphonies are so much in trouble financially. I wouldn't.
No job security when your audience is 75 years old on average, right?
And so in jazz,
for any young people listening to this, don't go into the symphony. Start rocking out now while you still have a chance, or learn how to rap. Right?
Rap, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's why I remember I was on Quora, and I love going on Quora and giving my 2 cents. It's a great platform. And this kid was 13, and he says he has perfect pitch, and he plays piano, and he's playing upright bass, and he wanted to give upright bass, and he wanted to pick up a brass instrument, I advised him to pick up the sax, because I think the sax players are usually the coolest guy in the band, in my opinion, and there's a lot more. I mean, if you pick up the French horn, where are you going to play the French horn?
Right.
Or even an oboe.
Or even trumpet or trombone. I mean, it's hard to step into a scenario where it's a 3-piece band and you can bring your trumpet or your trombone. But, you know, there's been bands, Bruce Springsteen and George Thorogood come to mind, of kind of rock bands that always had a saxophone. It just fits easy.
Revivalists, to talk about current day, Revivalists have a sax player. Now, most of these guys double. I mean, they play another instrument. I mean, doubling in the sax world, as I learned because I started taking sax, doubling usually means you double on flute and you double on maybe clarinet. Other woodwind, or well, flute isn't a woodwind, but most guys, like the trumpet player, the Lake Street Dive, their guy plays a trumpet and he also plays, I think, keyboards. I don't remember.
Like a utility kind of guy.
Yeah, utility kind of player. Yeah, so it's not their main thing. But I'm keeping your chops up. I mean, keeping your embouchure up. I mean, that's a lot of work for just playing a few songs. I mean, but sax and trumpet, okay, some trumpet, but I think trombone of those three is the least. What do you think? I mean,
well, you mentioned that the kid had perfect pitch, and what I was told growing up around southern Indiana and spending a lot of time in Kentucky is that perfect pitch was when somebody throws a trombone in a trash can and it hits a banjo. There's a lot of banjo playing going on where I'm from, and there's a little too much. You ever want to shut a banjo player down, you just got to put them in the weird keys, you know what I mean? If you're like, we're going to do this one in G sharp or C sharp.
Well, the joke is you want to get a guitar player to shut down, put music in front of him.
Oh, that's absolutely true.
Staff notes on the staff, and say play that.
Yeah, exactly.
So everybody's got their weak spot, right?
Oh, we all do, man.
So.
Yeah, it's interesting just how different it is, different pockets of the country that you go to, how much music changes, and sometimes for better and sometimes for worse. I always heard a lot of bluegrass stuff coming up, and oddly didn't really hear much country, not much old country. It was just always bluegrass and rock and roll. Never really knew about Johnny Cash or any of those guys until I was probably 19 or 20, which is interesting.
What do you think about genres today, Jimmy? What's your opinion on genres?
I think it's the bane of music's existence. And I remember when it happened. I'm just old enough that I remember when it happened, when the superstores started and TV Guide came out with the BMI Tape Club.
Yeah.
My sister and I would do this, and you got 11 tapes or 12 tapes or whatever it was for a penny.
Yep, I remember that.
And you had to choose a genre.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I ever looked at something and said, what do they mean? Because it would have like pop, R&B, rock, country. There weren't many genres, but there were a few. And that was the first time it was ever introduced to me of like music being this thing that had to be categorized. Because before that, I remember seeing albums that would be my uncle's albums or my dad's albums or whatever, and you could have Johnny Cash on one side and Ray Charles on the other side. So it was like, it was good music or it wasn't good music. There was two kinds of music. There was good music and there was music that wasn't so good.
Well, now Ray Charles ventured into the country realm.
Sure, but sometimes it would be more of a stretch than that. You could have like Jimmy Reed on one side and a straight up country artist on the other side, or a jazz musician on one side and a country guy, or the lines weren't as hardcore as they became with the advent of superstores. And they would send you the thing with TV Guide, the BMI Tape Club, so you give them a penny and then they would send you the worst tape on the planet once a month for the next year, and all of a sudden you'd owe them $1 million. And somehow they were letting little kids do that, I guess, because me and my sister...
I did that. I mean, that was my exposure to pop music. I was exposed to... and I don't remember what Columbia, the Columbia Record Club.
Yeah, that was exactly. I think that might be what it was. Instead of BMI, maybe it was Columbia.
It was Columbia, and you did the penny. You got 12, and you could pick records or tapes. And I had a tape deck in my car, not an 8-track, a cassette, and because 8-tracks were a thing for such a small period of time.
Sure.
And I went right to cassettes. Never went to 8-track, and nobody had cassettes when I went to cassettes, and then it became the thing. Everybody got rid of their 8-tracks and went to... I think 8-tracks kind of would bind up a lot, whereas cassettes were better. Anyway, I'm a few years older than you. Anyway, so... and I would sign up for that, and I, raised in a very strict Christian home, and I saw my first movie when I was a junior in high school. I thought God was going to strike me dead. I thought lightning was going to come down in the building when I went to see my first movie. I thought that was going to be the end of it. So, I mean, my music taste, the only way I could get music was through that club. And I was exposed to Stevie Wonder's fulfilling his first finale, and what else? All kinds of music that I never would have been exposed to.
Wow.
So thank God for that tape club thing,
man.
because they actually sent new releases that came out. It wasn't crappy stuff, at least when I was involved. I remember, I got new releases, and I remember Temptations. I was introduced to the Temptations. I mean, a lot of good music. Maybe I checked the box of soul music. Maybe that was the box I sent.
You're exactly right. That's exactly what happened, because my sister and I both checked the rock box, or hard rock or whatever, and we grew up in the hair metal days. So there wasn't that much good music in the hair metal days in the first place. Once you got your Metallica album or whatever it was, they were going to send you 12 really bad albums after.
So, okay, you're triggering in my mind that I don't remember checking the genre box. I don't remember that.
Maybe that had changed by the time I was
coming
into it. But I do remember that happening, and all of a sudden, Walmart's opened up, and these superstores, and you walked in there, and it was all of a sudden music was being sold, and there was categories. They'd have the blues category, and the country category, and the gospel category, and the rock category, and then those got more and more defined, and to where now I honestly think nobody truly knows what's what, and there's some brilliant stuff being made. It's hard for people to be innovative if it doesn't fit into a pre-existing category.
Yeah, I'm. Let's make good music. I mean, I believe that the Beatles were. I mean, they made, and the Rolling Stones. I mean, you got Honky Tonk Woman, and then that's a straight up country song, and and then Miss You is a disco song. So these guys were all over the map, and they were allowed to because they were the Beatles and they were the Rolling Stones, and nobody questioned that crap.
Sure.
But now, and I think the biggest example from this year was Lil Nas X. Mm-hmm. That's a trap song. That's a country song. The subject matter is country. Gonna go take my horse to the Old Town Road.
Yeah, and it blew up. It blew all the way up.
It broke a record for the most number one at the Hot 100, 19 weeks. That broke an all-time record ever.
But the right people probably, I don't know how it happened, but the right people probably got a hold of it. Billy Ray Cyrus was involved.
Based on what I've been able to read, it was on the country charts, and Billboard kicked it off because it wasn't country enough.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the big news.
Wow.
And then Billy Ray got on it. But Lil Nas X did that. Talk about independent artists.
Isn't Trent Reznor part of it too?
Yeah, well, not directly. It was a beat that a guy had done in, I think, the Netherlands, who Lil Nas X got online and looked for beats. You can go down to a laundry list of beats and find a beat that you like. And he bought this beat for I think $25 from this guy he'd never met. It was like you enter in your credit card and you select it and then you download it. And the guy that had built the beat had sampled some Trent Reznor stuff.
Wow.
That's how that all happened.
Interesting.
And they backtracked that after the thing just blew up and found out who he was, and then that's why I guess they had to give Trent Reznor some credit. I mean, if it had never blown up, Trent Reznor would have never known.
Right. Exactly.
But there's a genre hopping thing. I mean, that's a great song.
And it's huge. It's vital for the growth of music, but I can't help but wonder, if a band is innovative as the Beatles were in their timeline, if that band came out today, would that band have a chance?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but I mean, we're so disjointed. I mean, we're so scattered in our attention spans.
Labels, and so much of it is labels too. There's an old thing in sales, and especially in the entertainment industry, that people don't know what they like what they know. So if something is just made present to the masses, then they decide that they like it. I mean, it's not really everybody listening to the stuff they really like. Oftentimes they're just being fed something until they say, okay, I know what that is, so it's grown on me. I mean, how many times does that happen to you? Right? Haven't you ever heard a song be like, eh?
And then it goes on, yeah.
You listen, and by like the fifth time you're going, like you're humming along with it and stuff, and it becomes part of it.
Well, the Lil Nas X's second song, which is Panini, which didn't quite go to number one, but I think it cracked the top 10, if I'm not mistaken. When I first heard it, I said, he's going to be a one-hit wonder, because I didn't like it. I like that song now.
Yeah.
So there's an example, and I really loved Old Town Road. Now, Panini is more of a traditional, I guess, hip-hop song, closer to hip-hop than country. I don't think it's got any country in it, but genres. I've been told, in my aspiring artist career, you got to select. I've been told by people in town here that you've got to narrow your niche and you've got to focus on a specific. And I think that's the Nashville box, which you've heard me talk about. It's a term I made up, and I don't agree with that. I don't think
tricky, man,
I think that's old-fashioned thinking.
It is, and it's tricky because what if you make 5 rock albums and then all of a sudden you write the greatest jazz song or whatever? That's do you not throw it out there? Do you not record it? How much of that actually happens? You know, how many incredible singer-songwriters in Nashville that are famous for writing ballads have written just balls-out rock tunes that nobody ever took seriously or whatever.
I'm sure that's the case.
Because it's not what they're known for, you know.
People have preconceived ideas on songs.
They absolutely
Where are we
do.
at on our time?
And artists.
20
20
minutes.
minutes.
Okay. We got some more time.
Yeah, man.
You know, it's like when you go pitch a song at publishers, people want to know, you know, in a room, have you've ever done that? And they have a room and the publisher's sitting in front and taking their time to listen to uncut material, which is very generous of them. But they typically, I've noticed, they always want to see. So you leave your stack of CDs. That's why they used to do it at NSAI. I haven't been there. When I moved to Nashville 2 years ago, and I started for my first 6 months, I went to their Thursday night meeting every Thursday night at NSAI, Nashville Songwriters Association, and they would have publishers come in, and you could pitch to them, and you'd bring your CD. I wonder if they're still doing CDs in 2019. They were doing it in 2017 and 2018. You stack your CDs in the order that you come in, and then they go from the first serve to. So if you come in, you stick yours at the bottom, and you got to wait till like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night to get it heard. And anyway, so the packed room, everybody shoulder to shoulder, and the publisher, he or she will pull the CD out, name the song, and they'll look up and say, whose song is this? Well, I think they're doing it for two reasons. One, they're not going to listen to the song if the person isn't there.
Sure.
Because maybe the person never left.
And two, they want to see what you look like.
They want to see what you look like.
Well, that's the whole thing.
And I had a songwriter who told me that he co-wrote. He was probably about my age, you know, maybe a few gray hairs, and he said he co-wrote with a younger guy, and he said matter of factly, without just recognizing, he said we pitch the same song, and if he pitches it, it'll get a much better reception. Exact same song, same recording, everything.
Sure.
But if I pitch it, they'll say it's dated.
Because people in the music industry are listening with their eyes.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's so important, you know, people like Adele. And I think Adele is beautiful. I'm not saying anything about Adele's looks, but that's why it's so important that real artists are making it on real artistic merits still. Maybe it's harder on them than it ever has been before, but it's still happening. And it's more important than ever. You know, it's unfortunate because there's a lot of them that are getting by just on their looks, and it's not so much about anymore how great do they write or how great do they sing.
MTV killed the radio star.
And it really did, you know. I mean, Dylan wouldn't have a chance today, or some of the most innovative bands in my mind, like bands like Pink Floyd, they wouldn't have a chance now. Pink Floyd sold a lot of albums.
Was it you that told me that Slipknot were a little bit older in age and they literally wore the masks because of ageism?
Back toward the industry, yeah, you know. Exactly. And they did it grassroots, you know. They were playing live shows and nobody could stop them. Once they got that momentum going, they rocked so hard that nobody could stop them from doing what they were doing. From venue to venue to venue to venue, the crowds just got out of control and they were undeniable. And that's, you know, it's still doable that way too, I guess. But
what's that band, that spoof band that is just over the top hair metal?
Steel Panther?
Yes, Steel Panther.
Those are guys playing a part. Follows those guys everywhere, man. He loves them. That dude can sing.
I mean, they're wearing makeup. They're wearing wigs. I guess I heard a guy present on them that was our manager who took care of their merch for them, and he said, you know, behind the scenes, they're playing a part, completely playing a part, and you know, they want to go home to their family. They got family, and they're just they're making big bank.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, it's like this happens all the time. In the 70s, you know, a lot of people that listened to disco, all of a sudden when it died, the same people that had on, you know, bell bottoms and the butterfly collar and the whole bit, or dancing the hustle, those same people were like, oh yeah, that's I don't like it. That's terrible. And the same thing happened with hair metal, and it happens. It's funny, like the human condition, you know. Something will get super duper cool, and then when it goes away, they're like, oh yeah, that sucks. It's like you were one of the ringleaders with this whole thing, you know what I mean? And I saw it when I was in junior high with a lot of people, Nirvana, you know, the kids that I knew that were really into punk, the few kids I knew that loved Nirvana, all of a sudden when Nirvana blew up, they didn't like them anymore. And a lot of the metalheads and rock guys that loved Metallica, once Metallica blew up, they didn't like them anymore.
Well, part of the Nirvana thing, and I'm would never say I was a Nirvana head. I mean, I remember when they made it, but I was so deep into the blues. I mean, I was still into Stevie Ray. I mean,
right.
At that point, and so I didn't get it, but it spoke to a lot of people. But a lot of people, it was anti-establishment, right? And so when they got successful, then suddenly they are part of the establishment. And that's an issue, I think. You know, I think that was an issue for them specifically. And also, Eddie Vedder, what's that band?
Pearl Jam.
Yeah, Pearl Jam. Same thing. You know, anti-establishment, and they did finally win a Grammy, and they did go and accept it. So if that's part of your persona, I love those bands. I love that music.
Yeah.
Pearl Jam's amazing.
Yeah, I agree. Pearl Jam. Soundgarden was my favorite band from that whole era. I always felt like musically they were just on another level than all the other Seattle bands. Incredible stuff. Just walls of guitar. That guitar player is freaking genius, dude. I mean, dig into those albums. It's just, it surrounds you. But yeah, it's interesting, you know, how that stuff is still sticking because it was great, but it's just interesting how generations do that. Like, they kind of turn their back oftentimes on the music that they liked before. So, like, seeing a lot of the same people that would make fun of Motley Crue or Vince Neil's kind of put on a few pounds or whatever, and they'll buy the ticket and go see him. The same people that would make fun of him. You know, it's just interesting for artists because, you know, if you're a chef, somebody has to go to college to become a food critic, or if you're making films, somebody has to get a degree to become a film critic. But if you're a musician, man, everybody's a music critic.
Oh yeah,
everybody is a music critic.
Yeah,
the dumbest person on the planet is a music critic. You know what I mean? They don't have to have any data or product knowledge or culture or anything. They're going to have an opinion for certain. It's just funny how it works.
And it is very, I mean, it's very subjective, and a lot of A&R artists, our artist labels, A&R artist and repertoire, the management, the guys who decide if you make it or not, at the record company, they don't have the power they used to, but they've missed a lot. I mean, they was it Decca that turned down the Beatles?
Decca missed the Beatles.
And let's see,
U2.
Bono's got a letter from, I don't remember which one of the big labels rejected him, you know, for U2, and a lot of bands were missed, you know, and then somehow
Elton John, everybody told him no. He just didn't give up.
Yeah, I guess while seeing his most recent documentary, and I just saw him in concert here in Nashville, and he talked a bit about his story, and he really didn't want to be an artist. He just wanted to be a songwriter, he and Bernie, and they put out a song because nobody else would cut it. So they put out, Your Song was their first breakthrough, I believe, and he didn't want it. He just wanted to be a songwriter. I mean, but boy, what an artist he became.
Yeah.
What the heck. So love Elton John.
Me too. Yeah, that's interesting stuff, man. Elton, who were we talking about right before Elton? I had a thought right before Elton. Oh, yeah, you said the Beatles thing. When they got rejected in the letter from Decca, Decca said that guitar music was on its way out. Right before it exploded. Yeah. It's like when Tom Morello came out when I was in junior high, the first time I heard Rage Against the Machine. It's like hearing somebody do something that radically different. Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine just was like, all right, the guitar is never going anywhere. It's never going to stop. This guy's turned it into a turntable. Yeah,
actually, from the guitar standing, finally, guitar sales are doing quite well based on what I've read. But now it's more acoustic. Acoustic is outselling electric.
Wow.
And they say and women are buying more new guitars than men.
Beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
and
great
the
news.
women, they say it's some phenomenon. It's the Taylor Swift phenomenon, because Taylor Swift used to, well, not so much anymore. I wonder if she still plays acoustic guitar. She's more about being the show woman, but standing up there with her dress and her boots and strumming on acoustic guitar when she first broke out, and that now a lot of young women want to, and more power to them. Nothing that kind of irritates me more is when I see a local, like when I would see songwriters and they'd see women singing their songs they'd written, but they'd have to have a boyfriend or a brother or a friend play guitar for them. There's no reason they can't play their own guitar.
I think that's why there's more and more female guitar players now, because not just musically, but like culturally, women in America are,
killing it in all levels.
Killing it.
When you get on Instagram, there's so many 20-something or 19 to 25-year-old lead players, female lead players, that are just tearing it up, and there aren't that many guys at that age level.
Well, yeah, I read somewhere that there's more women getting college educations.
60%. So our young guys, that's a whole nother podcast subject, but our guys are being left behind.
What the hell are they doing?
They're playing video games. Well, I mean,
They're playing video games. Yeah, right.
Literally, according to articles that I've read. I mean, they have no ambition for whatever reason, or they think it's stacked against them, or I don't know. There's movements to try to save our men, our young men, our boys and young men. I mean, well, I think for one thing, society has confused them. I'm certainly not for. I'm certainly the issue of Me Too movement had to happen. I support that 100%. But for a young man in college, it's like now they have every level of progression in their relationship. You have to get explicit. It's like you have to sign a paper. Okay, is it okay if I
get a permission slip from their mom?
Yeah. You literally, in colleges, it's explicit consent. Is that the term? I think that there's something consent. Is explicit consent, where you literally have to say, okay, is it okay if I do this?
Yeah.
Is it okay if I kiss you? Is it okay if I put my arm around you? And then so on. And so
you think a lot of the young guys are just scared?
Scared. You don't know what to do. I don't have the answer. I'm not an expert on it, but it is an issue. Are young, and you've got two sons, so I'm sure that's something that is of interest to you. They're young yet, but it's a tough time to be a young man, a young boy, I feel, in our society.
Yeah, we're losing a lot of it. We're losing a lot of that just men being men thing. We really are with the young people. And I'm not saying being aggressive towards women, or of course not.
Of course not.
Nothing like that. I'm just saying men just doing their thing. We've been kind of softened up and feminized to a certain extent. Men as a whole.
Yeah, and they say that testosterone levels in men has gone down decade by decade.
Really?
And I don't know, that could be in our diet. That could be the chemicals that we're consuming and like our food packaging. I don't know what that is. But not to say that, the advances that women are making and still need to make is very important. But we don't want to leave our young men behind either.
Right.
So, I know it's tough. It'd be really hard to be a teenager today, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. It was free-range parenting. When I was coming up, it was kind of like parents weren't afraid to see their kids take their lumps or learn their lessons the hard way. And for whatever reason, my generation and the people like 10 years ahead of me all of a sudden said, we have to coddle our children and we have to baby them and make sure they never get hurt, and we can't let them out of our sight and all this. For whatever reason, I don't know why that happened. I don't know if it was the internet and all of a sudden all these terrible things were, all this terrible information that had probably went on since the beginning of time was available to us, and all of a sudden we said, we got to put our kid in, wrap them in a bubble and keep them safe.
Well, here's an interesting how our society. I love seeing how society moves and not making judgments on if it's right or wrong or good or bad. Just observing what it is. But I heard on a newscast I think on NPR about a book that had come out, and it talked about an analyzation of how the roles of course, in the 50s, you had women most of them didn't work. They were at home, but they weren't called stay-at-home moms. They were called housewives.
Yeah.
And their main focus was taking care of the house. And all the commercials on TV were about make sure this brand of Pledge will make your furniture shine better, or get the laundry cleaner, or get the dishes cleaner. And the kids were like out of mind and out of not to be thought of. And there was a segue over a period of time. When did it start becoming
the focal point?
The kids became the focal point.
Right.
I mean, it's, my upbringing, my dad was not very, I had to fend for myself, and I was like, I'm not going to support you. And so, the parenting that is going on now is great, phenomenal, supporting and encouraging. I wish I'd had that, and that's important. But the segue from focusing on taking care of the house, and the kids were like, let the kids do whatever. We're not the focus point. And now if a parent, or stay-at-home mom, stay-at-home dad, now you don't say house dad or housewife.
Right.
You don't say that. That's an outdated term.
Say that, Mark.
And it reflects the fact that the focus of the parent is not the house. It's and as it should be.
Sure.
Taking care of the kids, but
absolutely.
It wasn't my parents certainly. You take care of yourself, and that gave you more freedom to make mistakes, and I suppose, and screw up, and pros and cons with everything, right? I'd wish I'd had more support from my dad, and like I see current dads now today, like you. I see you on the phone or hear you on the phone with your kids. You're very supportive and telling me you love them and encourage them, and that's great. That's phenomenal for them.
Yeah, it's certainly a juggling act for everybody now, because even, I'm blessed to have my wife, and, we're both there as much as we can be, but both of us have to work, of course. That's the biggest difference. Two biggest differences in my mind. One is back then, people could make it off of a one-income household.
Yeah.
And the second one is that was before the huge socially acceptable objectification of women as a whole, which changed kind of the whole dynamic. Like young women now, they're coming up seeing other girls being objectified on TV constantly, and they're inundated with that information. They're not seeing women on TV being, somebody's wife, or being married and having a family. That's not the focal point for a lot of young women now. A lot of young women are just seeing the objectification. So it's confusing, because that's not necessarily nature. That kind of goes against nature. Nature is the family unit, in my mind at least. And over the last probably 30 years, we've had this huge objectification happen, which makes it harder for families to stay together. And it's unfortunate.
I think, that's an interesting point. I hadn't...
just my opinion. Maybe I'm light years away, but it's just my take on it. Because I see it a lot, playing music, and it's sad in many ways, because as those girls get older, oftentimes, they kind of put all their eggs in one basket, and they get older, and the kind of guys they're used to being around are looking at the next batch of girls. It's just like a vicious cycle sort of thing. This is why marriage is important, because it creates a balance, and families are important. Divorce rate's higher than it's ever been before. There's fewer people getting married. There's fewer people having children. Yeah. Not enough young people are having children to even sustain us as a society right now.
Yeah,
young people don't know. It's...
Yeah, our population would be decreasing if we didn't have immigration.
Exactly.
And other countries in the world that have a decrease in population, a couple countries that I absolutely love, Italy and Japan. Japan's population is decreasing because none of the women want to have kids. And they also have the longest life expectancy in the world, so they're rapidly aging. Because their older people aren't dying off, and there are no new ones coming in, so that average age is just accelerating, and it's a huge society problem. that every developed country is going to see, but not to the extent. And Italy is another country that they're not having kids, and their fertility rate is very low. You're supposed to have 2.1 per adult, 2.1 births per adult woman to maintain without immigration, and we're below that. I think we're about 1.8. I think Italy's at 1.1 or 1, and Japan's 1.1. South Korea, same. So developed country, and you know what societies are having massive amounts of kids? The countries that are primarily Muslim.
Really?
Like Indonesia. Their population is exploding. So just interesting for the population of the world. Just interesting.
That is interesting. Well, it has to sustain.
So there'll be a lot more. I mean, if everybody stays the same religion that their parents were, in 50 years there'll be a lot more Muslim population than there are now, percentage-wise.
Sure. And Chinese, right? Chinese.
Well, no, Chinese. China. They had one country. They don't. Their population isn't growing. So I have to study up on that. But they had the one-child policy for the longest time, which they've erased. And that's why there's so many guys. I mean, of a certain age, of the marrying age, there's a real shortage of women, because if there was a woman that was pregnant, they would abort it, or even after it was born, they would kill it, because they could only have one child, and they all wanted a son. So I mean, the fact is, the demographics of a certain age group in China is there's a shortage of women. And so you get all these guys.
Wow.
There's not enough women for them to get married to. So yeah, I would say their population is exploding. I think it's growing now because they got rid of that. But it's the Muslim, of course. China is primarily Buddhist, but it's the Muslim countries like Indonesia is one I know for sure that is just exploding. I think Malaysia also. So. Yeah, demographic trends in the country. In developed countries, first world developed countries like Europe, Western Europe, and the U.S., Canada, Australia, New Zealand, like the G7, the G20. Take the G20, the top 20 economies. Developed, consider that developed. I mean, where's the cutoff? 21 isn't developed. I mean, but just generally speaking, population growth is slowing. Birth rates are slowing. And so...
Why do you think it is?
Well, people get affluent and they don't want to have kids. And, there's other choices. I mean, kids tie you down. And if you can have a choice, if you have other things in your life. And then people that are having kids are having like one or two.
Yeah.
Not having a bunch of kids, I mean, a generation ago, how many kids was the average for a family? 3, 4, 5?
There were 7 of us. I don't know.
7 in your family. There were 3 in my family.
Seemed like a lot.
And now, I mean, there's a lot of one kid families, 2 kid families. A 3 kid family, I think, is rare.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of friends that have 3 kids. I've got 3 kids, and I don't have a whole bunch of friends that do.
How many have 1? Or
most of them have 1.
Yeah, see?
Sometimes there's 2, but rarely more than 2, it seems like. Or at least in my circles.
Yeah, I think that holds weight.
I think they kind of stop. Nowadays it's...
And why would you say most of them said, we're just going to have 1?
Because they just want to spoil the shit out of them. Most people nowadays, I want to have this one kid just completely ruin it. You know what I mean? Give it everything and make it impossible.
Oh.
I had 3 because I understand strength in numbers, man. You grow up the youngest of 7, you learn a lot of things. But yeah, I mean, if those populations are exploding, we got to make sure that Indonesia and Malaysia are hearing good music and they can get guitars in their hands.
There you go. That's the way of thinking.
Deal.
Yeah.
That's a big deal, man.
Yeah.
How many of those people can rock out or write good songs or whatever if the population is exploding like that? Or just think about if China, when China wakes up, it's gonna happen. I mean, there's no way around it. It's just a matter of time before those people wake. They're starting to now. When they wake up and get that kind of freedom, like creativity and stuff, How's that going to change the world?
Well, they've got an iron fist control on the internet.
Yeah.
And
but it can't last forever. I mean,
that's a whole nother podcast.
Right. Well, I shouldn't say that. Love you, China.
Yeah, I mean, they control. I mean, Google is in great, or Alphabet, the parent of Google, has been criticized greatly because they have gone along with China's restrictions on what will show up in a search. Mm-hmm. China is very totalitarian as far as not allowing censoring. If you're in China and you try to Google certain things that they don't want you to see, it won't show up on the search.
Sure.
And the Google algorithm will just not show it to you. And Alphabet does that so they can keep the business. I mean, okay, you're Alphabet and you're saying, okay, where is our biggest growing potential market? Where would that be in the world? Would it be the country with the largest population in the world, or do we want to forget about them? No, we want to be there, right?
Sure, absolutely.
We want to have our hands in that. We want to penetrate that,
course.
And that's an untapped market because it's developing. So yeah, I mean, I understand the business decision, but there are people saying that, hey, for human ethics reasons, and you need to draw a line. Well, how do you draw that line? I mean, I'm not saying right. I'm not on either side of the equation.
I mean, are they wrong or are they right? I mean, if we have a whole generation of youth, young men that are doing nothing except for playing video games in the United States, who's to say China's wrong? Our youth is absolutely failing on every level, to a certain extent. So maybe they're right. I don't know. I don't know if they're right or wrong, but I'm just a observation that if that large of an amount of human beings experience creative freedom at the same time, man, you're talking about like the Renaissance multiplied by
If they did, yeah, but I don't know if that. And there's still. I had a missionary come to our church a few years ago, and he was in China, and he said, I know all the press is that China is an upcoming power. Now this was a couple years ago. I don't remember how many years ago it was, but he said, let's see, I'm trying to remember where I was. I was in Watertown. Okay, so it wasn't that long ago, and he said that. Don't believe everything you read. China is still extremely poor. Yes, because they're 1.2 billion people, 1.3, whatever it is. There's strength in numbers, but the average Chinese person lives on, that we couldn't even imagine how poor they are. So yeah, well, if they elevate their way of living. But they're kind of being repressed in a way. I mean, I don't know what the average income Chinese base is like, $4,000 a year, average per capita income. That's how do you?
Are they all musicians?
Are they all musicians? Good one.
I want to go. Suddenly, I want to go to China really, really bad. These are my people. Maybe I'm Chinese, Tim. Maybe I'm not Irish.
What's the joke? What do you say to a musician? You want fries with that?
Yeah, right. You want fries with. Or the one I always heard was a blues guitar player that won $1 million on the lottery, and they said, "What are you gonna do?" And he said, "I'm gonna keep playing until the money runs out." That one hits a little close to home.
Why don't we call? What do we got? How many minutes do we got?
We're at 50.
Ooh, yeah, I think we should close it down.
Let's do it.
All right, so this is our first podcast.
Good times, man.
Jimmy D and the Wolf.
Jimmy D and the Wolf. Peace.
We'll see you next time.